What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm BDLM coming with my buddy J4Y, bringing you episode number 54 of our Dota On Demand podcast. What is going on, man?
Thanks for having me on this lovely episode. I feel honored. I feel really honored to be here. Doing well, actually. We're kind of actually keeping it between ourselves, and this is, once again, non-Dota related. Believe it or not, we say things like this all the time. But we are keeping each other motivated to get in better shape and keep healthy. And I have to say, 3 days going strong. I mean, that probably means a consistent pattern, right?
Practically abs. Pretty sure that's
no, we got the abs. That's never been in question. It's just trying to show them under the layer of fat has always been the issue at hand. So I guarantee you there's like an 8-pack or something under there. You know.
Yeah, I've got my preemptive hipster haircut. So I'm just ready to go clubbing wearing a local band t-shirt and some faded jeans.
Good God.
So it's going to be good. But anyway, this is episode number 54, and it's actually a crazy setup because we appreciate all of you guys that listen in on the podcast. We figured, you know what, we haven't really taken advantage of our video at all. We do like to coax you guys to YouTube, but we haven't actually done a ton with it lately. So we're kind of going back to a spin-off of an episode that we did a long time ago that we called a Battlecast, which kind of didn't work all that well, but we have a much better way of doing it this time. So we're actually going to be following this crazy little series that happened between Fnatic and Kaipi. And it kind of came to my attention because I happened to watch a game that Kaipi and EG had played in the Corsair Cup. I just caught a bit of it, but in this game, Kaipi picked up Timbersaw and Spirit Breaker, and I'm like, this is hilarious. And then, of course, the natural reaction of that is to pick up Bloodseeker. And I didn't get to watch the whole of that game. I'm like, that's going to be a crazy thing to bring up. Lo and behold, this ridiculous little best of 3 comes up. So we're going to go ahead and go through it game by game and really just kind of point out the stuff that we thought was interesting. And I guess now is maybe the time to disclaimer. We're going to be using the joinDota VODs. We don't own anything, not the shoes on our feet or the videos we're playing. And thanks to Toby for casting these games.
Yeah, so basically the summary there is we're going through a best of 3. If you're a podcast listener, which most of you are, great. Continue to listen on, and we appreciate it. But if you also want to get a little visual side-by-side upgrade to the episode, if you will, feel free, even after you listen to it, stop by on the YouTube, check out the episode when we put it up there, which will be within a day. And you can just see you can watch it as we're discussing it in the video portion. But it's not like a requirement. It's just... It's a bonus feature, essentially, is what's going to happen here. So
there you go. It should be good. I mean, every single one of these games, they weren't incredibly fast-paced, but I think just the idea behind them worked really well. And I don't know if you started that VOD yet, but you can probably go ahead.
I can hit the old play button here.
Plop. I wanted to say that this series kind of reminded me of just how great Captain Eternal Envy was. You know, when he was the captain of No Tidehunter, he was kind of famous for Roche timers. And not only that, but timing everything. Writing down the timers for ultimates when those things would be coming up. And that really helped his team to a lot of success. And of course, they were able to win DreamHack Winter 2012 off of that. And these games, just because of how unorthodox all these picks were, really just kind of reminded me that this guy's got some tricks up his sleeves. He's, really trying to come up with something cutting edge, not just your standard draft. And I really liked just seeing what he came up with.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to kind of compare them to, not necessarily the meta breakers, but they're definitely willing to experiment and, try strategies that are definitely probably viewed on as not the norm, viewed as, maybe a little out of the ordinary, but, I mean, they're interesting concepts, and I think that's exactly why we're breaking it down, because, in an idea, actually, it could make a whole lot of sense, and, so it's always kind of exciting to watch them play in general, and even with the stand-in, they seem to have some pretty good synergy, so that's all I really gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, the first game kind of comes off to me as, this pocket strat. This is this preformed thing, everything feels really particular. Like, you even go and you look at how the first set of bans go. Kaipi decides to go for a Chen ban and an Outworld Devourer ban. The Chen, I guess, alright, maybe even seeing an OD ban later on could make some sense, but these are the first two bans right out of the gate, and I think this really goes to show you that Eternal Envy is really, right off out of the gates, concerned about being able to stop counters to this lineup that he's trying to put together.
Yeah, and I mean, Fnatic obviously having no clue what they're up against. I mean, I call him so many names. I'm going to call him Kaipi, I'm going to call him KP.
I like that one.
Kaipi, which is kind of like a Monty Python Holy Grail tribute when I like the soldiers in the knee. But anyways, soldiers of the knee. God, I haven't seen that in a while. But let's move on from that reference. But they first picked Naga, Siren, which brings me back to the TI2 days. I'm like, oh man, what kind of awesome wombo combo team they go on? Enigma? What are they doing here? And well, you'll shortly see. Right afterwards, they go Spirit Breaker. So. Not quite the wombo combo you would expect, of course, unless he gets Agnum Scepter, but let's not go there. And then against the Visage Alchemist, so of course, typical pickups from Fnatic. Alchemist, you see him all the time now, one of the most common farmer heroes in the game, and then Visage has been on the presence as well, so, nothing out of the ordinary coming out from them.
Yeah, I mean, last week we kind of talked a lot about Treant Protector. We're going to bring it up a little bit more in this game. But I just thought it was so interesting that Kaipi have this great opportunity to be able to pick up that Treant, because you're going to see as the graph progresses that this Naga Siren isn't a carry. She's a support Naga Siren. And they decide to choose that over the Treant. And I think, again, as you see the Kaipi drafts go on, I think it's so crazy that they go to choose that, but of course, once we get into the game, you're going to see exactly how that winds up playing out and just how instrumental that ult becomes in a way that we don't think about it as being like the main feature. Thinking of it as an escape is sort of like this bonus thing, like, oh yeah, if you have to, you can pop the ult, TP out.
Now, what really, I think, confused both of us to some degree is how they picked up Spirit Breaker right away in their first two picks. Now, I can't say I've seen a Spirit Breaker ban yet in a real game. So the fact that they need to use one of their early picks when later on we'll see they actually pick up Lifestealer, he could have easily gotten banned out in this next set of rounds. I mean, who knows? They had no idea what they were up against, but I figure like a more valuable pick, one that actually had a chance of getting banned or picked out from the other team, would make a lot more sense. So they maybe just got lucky, or maybe they did throw off their strategy and one of these bans actually was what they had in mind and they kind of did a runner-up. I don't know exactly how they chose it, but yeah, I definitely, that's a very questionable choice to pick him up so early.
I mean, I think it's interesting that this strat kind of, I mean, I don't really know what would have gotten banned out that they would have really wanted to pick up. I kind of feel like they had all their lanes planned. But it is interesting how Lifestealer and then their last pick, Bounty Hunter, like you would think that those would be heroes that, oh yeah, we really, right off the bat, we want to make sure we have those, because I think when you see this whole team assembled, you really see how dependent it is upon being able to pick up early kills, being able to pick up early track kills, on moving around the map quickly. I feel like without the Lifestealer, without the Bounty Hunter, it's more and more questionable. So I just thought it was really interesting that Eternal Envy decided to wait until his third and his fifth pick to pick up those heroes.
Yeah, indeed. And I'll just run over quickly to finish out the bans. KP decides to go Puck, Enigma, and Bane as the last ones. And it's just, you do put all these pieces together when you see those bans, because KP ends up running a 5 melee team. Very hard engaged melee team. So Puck, OD, Enigma, huge AoE damage or crowd control forms to just mess with the 5-man melee engaged team so well. So, very, very smart drafting in terms of bans. If you're going to run, let me correct that, if you decide to run such a lineup, it's a very good idea to take those kind of heroes out, because normally, like I think I was saying early on, you would think, oh, they're probably going to pick up Enigma. I mean, they have Naga. That's a great combination. But no, they're going against it. So instead, they're going to just ban them out. So definitely a smart choice there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, like, at the end of the day, once all this kind of comes out and you get to see all the bans and all the picks for Kaipi, That's like kind of why I call it a pocket strategy, because it's just this one. It's all set up to do this one thing, and kind of I feel like once it's all out on the table, you see it. You can sort of deal with it later on once you understand what's coming at you. Maybe even a cheese strat if you want to call it that. But the Chen obviously being able to drop the heal means that you're not going to be able to pick up the quick kill to help you progress in the team fight. And then, like you said, the strong AoE damage as well as the crowd control is something that obviously Kaipi would have a hard time dealing with this all melee squad.
Now, here's a question for you. Now, obviously, we already know ahead of time everything, so we get to ask these kind of questions before everyone else gets to see it that is tuning in. But they ended up picking, like you said, Fnatic. Well, I'm just going to go over their lineup. Visage, Alchemist, Queen of Pain, Weaver, and then they get Treant Protector at the end. So they decided to ban that Bane as their 5th. Now, between Bane and Treant, would you have banned? Why? Okay, why do you think they decided that Bane was the scariest option that they could have picked against them in this lineup, as compared to like a Treant or anyone else like that?
Yeah, I mean that's a strong question. I mean, I think between just the options they had in the Enfeeble, I also don't like, but the Enfeeble being able to nightmare one of these melee heroes, and then of course the Fiend's Grip being able to go through the Naix Rage, I think are probably your big reasons. And also when you look at Kaipi, I feel like their team, again, isn't dependent upon necessarily winning their lanes hard. It really sort of is like, okay, when level 6 hits, we have to sort of go ham. We got to pick up the track kills. And, you know, Treant to me is this hero that's about sort of winning all your lanes. And I don't think Kaipi were even really sort of expecting to really be able to win many of them. I will say that maybe they expected to really win the mid lane hard, as they picked the Timbersaw after the Queen of Pain, which is something that I was surprised about, and then surprised to see how well Timbersaw was able to do with that reactive armor. I mean, really, there is that point. We might as well jump to it now, actually. It's 21:57 in the VOD, where we get to see two, I think, really interesting things. One, where Spirit Breaker, playing a support alongside the Lifestealer and the Naga Siren, uses his body as a living ward and uses it to block the camp. And I think this is sort of crazy, first of all, because I feel like if you're running a Spirit Breaker, you either need the levels or you need items, or both. But you get to see where the Treant Protector really shows off his defensive capabilities against a melee-heavy team.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they do their hard engage, and you know, with a Lifestealer, Spirit Breaker, and Naga, they have a really great initiation, right? I mean, they have the charge to start it off, get a nice little bash stun in there, hopefully. The Lifestealer gets that amazing open wound slow, and then the net, I mean, to hold in place for a few seconds. So it's a lot of time to wail on a hero, especially Alchemist, who's pretty vulnerable to that. But the Treant not only giving that armor to give, you know, reduced damage and healing, but just the fact that he puts that seed on there to give health back to his ally on top of doing damage to everyone. I mean, it really actually ended up doing a great amount of work. It just, even at the lower levels, levels 2 and 3, really doing a great job. And you saw him there in the video if you were watching, just helping the Alchemist. You thought he was doomed, and then all of a sudden he's pretty much half or full health, and they paid for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I guess is kind of interesting, too, when you're trying to compare the Bane to the Treant. If Kaipi really is this team that is going to maybe surrender the early levels, then they're going to need kills and the tower gold. And obviously, Treant Protector sort of puts a halt on being able to kill the towers. And, you know, Kaipi really aren't this team that can kill the towers well. Of course, they put together a team that's actually really, really good at fighting underneath towers. But really, I think that's kind of one of the things that sort of led to their eventual downfall, is just the fact that they weren't able to get a lot of this gold early, and they weren't able to build up the tracks either.
Yeah, and another great note, actually kind of showed in the video as well, the fact that when you are triple melee against an Alchemist, we didn't count it, but there should have been a counter for how many times he got 3+ man stuns with his Unstable Concoction. I mean, they just obviously are lining it up for him, and you'll see, if you watch actually the whole VOD, you watch them do these ganks later on, while that counting down is getting lower, they start like splitting up a little bit because they're so afraid of getting stunned, and that really hurts them damage-wise, obviously, because they can't be attacking if they're trying to scatter. So that actually ends up working against them a large part, I'd say, to have that Alchemist with that, what is 100 radius, 175 radius, whatever it is, it's enough to hit these multiple heroes like every time.
Yeah, that was actually funny because I think when obviously that buff occurred, that was one of those things like, really, how often are we going to see that? And of course, every once in a while you'll see a 2-man stun, but this might be the first time I've seen more than one 3-man stun in a game. It was just kind of funny to get to see that component of it actually be a pretty big deal. But I want to ask you, I want to go back to that middle lane because I thought that was a pretty interesting matchup. One that I know as soon as you saw Timbersaw waddling towards that middle lane, something you were suspicious of, and something I was too. You know, Queen of Pain, this hero that typically is just so strong against melee champions middle, ends up winning for the first level or two, but then after that, Timbersaw is able to just get right back in it.
Yeah, I mean, Quap won the lane overall. Timber basically got no denies, I think, for pretty much the whole game. But the CS was close, though. At this point in the game, it's 27-20. I mean, he kept up very well, especially like you said, for a melee hero, where Quap can just usually put on the Shadow Strike, get that poison damage going, and just do a lot with it. And of course, rune control as well. Quap normally, I'm going to say the queen of it, which sounds really stupid, but she's really good at it. But no, he does really well. The reason it wasn't even so much that I was upset that Timber versus Quap is a matchup. I was upset for the fact that he's just middle. He obviously thrives on trees. I mean, that is his essential thing. And I made a joke earlier that when we were watching it, like, wouldn't it be funny if he could hook shot to Tree Protector and just like nail him with the Saw Blade or something, do some true damage or something?
Always does true damage.
That'd be brilliant. Of course, not going to happen. But in the middle lane, you do not have a lot of trees to hook to. The only ones you can hook to put you in tower range essentially, and that's dangerous. And you're definitely not going to get the true damage because when's Queen of Pain going to be next to trees with you? Not very often. So I just do not like that lane in him for all. I feel like he's obviously way better in a side lane.
Yeah, let's go ahead and look at, I think, the one moment in the game that sort of really, I think, puts together why the Naga Siren made just a ton of sense. Go ahead and look at 50-30 in this VOD, and you get to see how the Naga Siren ultimate just completely destroys Fnatic's attempt to follow up on Kaipi after grabbing this kill behind the tier 2 tower in the middle lane, pops the ultimate, 4 TP lights go off, and everybody makes it home safe.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is definitely where it all came together. Well, this wasn't the first instance. It happened a couple times throughout the game, especially on top lane, when they tried to dive that first tower so much. But, they get so close to killing Alchemist or something, and then either the heal would be too much or something would go wrong, and then Quap would come in, use her massive AoE damage, and start just bursting them down. So they always had so many issues with that top lane diving. But you could definitely see the power of the lineup when it came together, like in this middle lane. And God, the Naga ult it's brilliant for escaping. We've used it in the past, see it basically used defensively, I'd say for the most part. With the wombo combo kind of thing. But obviously, its defensive measures are just as important and shouldn't be discounted.
Yeah, the other thing that I think really is to Fnatic's credit is just how they wind up building this game, because I'd kind of forgotten about it until I'm looking at it now. You look at what Queen of Pain got as her first item, and it is the Ghost Scepter. Mm-hmm. And it's not the only one that winds up coming up on the team. The mech gets built quickly. Queen of Pain also winds up getting the power treads as well as the an ultimate orb very early on to try and build up these stats. Alchemist, the other hero who winds up getting that Ghost Blade and a Medallion of Courage. They just build so well to try and fight this. They really, I feel like, weren't thrown off at all. They still played the exact game that they wanted to play, and it wound up working out for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's why it goes to show why they're such a strong performing team, is that they didn't go their normal item builds at all, or skill builds. In fact, Alchemist, until level 10, did not have Goblin's Greed, not 1 point. He maxed out his Unstable Concoction and his Acid Spray, and of course his ultimate as well. And I mean, it was just because he was aware they were trying to keep him down. That was their whole premise, was to shut down Alchemist in the entire game. So he was going more of a battle strategy, like you said, medallion early. Get that armor or put the negative armor on Lifesteal or someone if you need to kill them, and just be able to tank it up and do a lot of AoE damage, hopefully, for your team. So they definitely played it right in that regard. Eventually, Hani goes to even Scotty, which of course is just unnecessary at that point. He just likes to go some of the silliest items on him. Now, I love the Scotty item, don't get me wrong, but maybe been some other choices that might have been better, but either way, of course, it did work out in their favor. And like you said, they did win this out. There's probably a few little notes extra on there that I'm not sure we really need to get too much into, like Vladimir's getting picked up early by Bounty Hunter. Obviously, makes perfect sense when you're a 5-man melee squad. Lifestealer maxing his open wounds first. Generally not the case. Of course, it did get nerfed, so maxing it might be seen more anyways in general, just so you can get that range on top of every other benefit you get.
Yeah, I mean, again, that I think is another big just show of like how important it was for them to be able to pick up kills, and they just really weren't able to generate them at a level they needed to have that propel them into the late game. But how about we move into game 2?
Sounds good to me.
Because I have an ulterior motive.
Oh.
I didn't tell you about it before right now, because we got to keep it spontaneous and organic.
Of course we do.
I think this is a great series, but I also wanted to make a grandiose spectacle of the fact that I called the buff's Vengeful Spirit potentially being enough to help remind people that she is possible in a lineup where, as a carry, where pushing and Roshan-centric stuff is viable. So I will bow now and live out this one time that I'm right. And anyway, moving on.
For those who are watching for the first time, you can skip ahead of this point in the VOD, or you don't have to see the bow. It's not necessary. Don't worry.
It's a good curtsy, I think. It's a strong curtsy. But what we're going to wind up seeing in this game is going to be Kaipi, who wind up picking up Bane, Shadow Fiend, Chen, Clockwork. Nope, I'm sorry, that's game 3. Okay, it's going to have...
Spoiler! Jeez.
Spoiler alert! Nature's Prophet, Bane, Chen, Shadow Fiend, and Vengeful Spirit against Fnatic, who are going to wind up picking up Alchemist, Darkseer, Dragon Knight, Visage, and as soon as it wants to pop up, I want to say the... Tinker, that's right. How could you forget the Tinker?
How could you forget? That's the question.
How could I forget the Tinker? So what are your thoughts initially, just off the bat, about how this draft wound up working itself out, and what team did you see coming out ahead?
Well, the funny thing is, especially with the bans, which you didn't really get to get into, but Naga and Lifestealer were the first 2 bans. Against Kaipi, so automatically they were gonna. I mean, I feel like they were gonna change their strategy anyways, because it just did not work out the way they were hoping. But they went instead to this real nice, heavy pushing team, which I mean, you can't fully tell that from live. I mean, yeah, Chen. Anytime you see Chen, Nature's Prophet on a team, you're like, okay, they're gonna do some pushing. And then Shadow Fiend, of course, with his 2-spell raise, clear the wave, is really awesome too. But then the Vengeful, like you said, thrown it in the mix, and ends up getting the farm from the lane. It doesn't go carry items necessarily, which we'll get into more, but going more the just nice team aura-y, tanky kind of items, and really ends up just doing tons of burst damage with his lineup and a lot of crowd control, which obviously, I mean, every lineup could use that. So, and then against Fnatic line, which we'll get into more, but I was not thrilled about their picks, needless to say. I liked some of them. I definitely like the Tinker. I like, seeing the Darkseer. Good combination there. But then when you go a tri-lane with Dragon Knight, Visage, and Alchemist, you irk me a little bit. You irk me with the Alchemist because he's a support in this game.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Mousesports run a successful support Alchemist, and I think they've actually made, several really strong cases for why they like it across, their recent history. But I do think it's weird. I mean, I have my VOD paused. We're waiting for the 5th pick from Fnatic, and if you look at it without Tinker, you go, okay, Darkseer off lane, Alchemist is the carry, Dragon Knight's going to go mid, Visage is going to be a support in a defensive tri-lane. It's really when they pick this Tinker that you go, never mind. It's not going to be that way necessarily. I guess they could have tri-laned the Tinker, but they decided not to, and they decided to run it mid. But really, the Darkseer and the Dragon Knight just gave me, I don't know if you want to call them dreams or nightmares. So when those two heroes were just so prevalent because of Wall and because of Frost Dragon, I just was like, how is this Kaipi lineup going to wind up working? Turns out it works pretty well.
Well, a couple more bans that are, I don't know if you want to call them fortunate or smart, but the Kodal ban, Fnatic actually ends up banning Kodal in their second round of bans, and it's so unfortunate in that case because they end up going against this super heavy push team and they're like, oh crap, well, we just got rid of our best weapon that we could use against that. So I think that's why they went with that Tinker as the 5th. They're like, we need some kind of anti-push. Tinker obviously known with his march of machines to have a pretty decent one of that, as long as he can get early game started, which we'll get into later. But another ban that I really actually want to point out is the Quap ban that KP pulls out. Hani not on Quap is, I mean, I'm not saying he's limited, but I'm saying every time he's on Quap, he has a good game. He really does. He loves that hero. It's one of his favorite. And when you take it out of the equation, he's got to go something else that he's, I'd just say, not as familiar with or not as comfortable with. And I think that threw them off a little bit as well, the fact that he couldn't get his Quap this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Quap would have been a really nice pick, and obviously, like you said, he wound up going some crazy items in the last game, but he made them work so well that you can't really discredit any of them. They're very smart choices. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think Shadow Fiend would have had a kind of a rough time against the Queen of Pain. She just as easily would have been able to Shadow Strike him and try and keep him down. So they wind up going the Tinker, and even then, I mean, if we want to jump ahead to the 10-minute mark in this VOD, you can just see how right off the bat they're really interested in trying to stop this Tinker from having a good start. He winds up progressing pretty well, but he doesn't get off to anything crazy. He gets his bots in a reasonable amount of time, but getting the Enfeeble right off the bat really makes it difficult for him to get creep kills. You can see he spends some mana using the laser to pick up some of his first creep kills.
Yeah, I mean, it's also perfect synergy. I mean, any hero would like to be against someone that can't deny well, but especially Shadow Fiend, who depends with his passive to build up damage as he gets last hits. So essential that is probably his weakest point of the game, is the first couple minutes where he has to get those stacks, because he has a lower base damage than most heroes. Little known fact. So, Enfeeble obviously guaranteeing to a point of him being able to get those last hits, secure it, and then get his farm going from there. I also wanted to say we didn't really point it out in their strategy. We said it was a pretty good pushing team, or maybe you did, but I'll just, I guess, reinforce it. The fact that it's also a minus armor team in a way. Just for the fact that Vengeful, obviously, with the Howl of Terror plus the Shadow Fiend Aura, really ends up stacking that greatly, and it allows you not only to kill heroes in quickly, but also to kill Roshan quickly, which they take full advantage of.
Yeah, I mean, this lineup, very Roshan-centric, also, as far as getting the push going, but they really were able to just take advantage of that super well. You'll even see it in Game 3 where you see it again. They were just very concerned about the Rosh timer, very concerned about having that extra element of control in the game. It wasn't necessarily that they were able to get so much farm on their Vengeful Spirit that they were able to use her to auto-attack people down. I really think it was more of just they were able to get her to a point where she was able to safely swap, able to contribute to the team fight, and more than just that initial burst. And then also secure the Aegis of the Immortal for Shadow Fiend, who we know is this really high damage hero that's just super flimsy.
Yeah, and well, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but let's just say Game 3 has Shadow Fiend 2, and it goes a lot different than this game with how he progresses with his farm and his safety. But regardless, another thing to point out with the Vengeful Spirit, with the tankiness, did you mention the double Ring of Protection start?
I did
Yeah,
not.
which is what you pointed to me actually, which definitely was interesting. Reminds me back the days when Naga Siren was popular, and I don't remember which player or team made it really popular, but someone started going right off the bat the 2 rings of protection, get that extra armor built up, and then turning it into Ring of Basilius and Tranquil Boots, and just really having an amazing time in the laning phase because you couldn't get harassed out, and you'd have plenty of mana and pushing potential if you want for the lane. So really a great choice.
Yeah, I mean, on the Naga Siren, that was obviously really popular when she had the much higher base damage. Now, unfortunately, that might be a little bit more difficult to run effectively, but I really liked it. I mean, I know when we were watching these games together, you were like, oh, it's kind of weird that she got the Tranquil Boots. It's something that I think I wind up really liking just because you want to get that really high movement speed and also about surviving that swap. And you see that she eventually will wind up going in for drums and then a BKB on the back of that. So really using this high mobility and high durability build to, like I was saying earlier, not to contribute beyond just that initial swap, that initial stun. She was able to use it to help propel the rest of the team in the team fight.
Yeah, and I really do also like maxing out the magic missile. Just get that extra damage going. And, you know, we've seen different skill builds in the past. And, I mean, obviously it's going to differ also from a support compared to a carry one. Supports may actually not decide to max it out. They could go the way... I remember, actually, in Heroes of New Earth, we'd always see the Howl of Terror getting maxed out first, just to get that team fight-centric kind of build going. And leaving that magic missile just a rank 1 for the low mana cost as well. But not in this case. Goes for the burst damage, and I think we were saying, it just makes perfect sense of this lineup. You think Test of Faith, you think Shadow Raises, Bane with his nuke. I mean, they have so much burst potential that it's really not a challenge to burst a lot of these squishier people down.
Yeah, I mean, again, not to jump the gun, but we actually get to see in Game 3 where maxing that missile first really helps a lot. It gets the first blood secured. So a great choice overall, and yeah, a great point to point out how it's been different across the different games, the skilling. And in this game, like I was saying earlier, a lot of these games are quite slow. But the fact that by 14:30 into the game, all our outer towers are gone for Fnatic. The push lineup has succeeded for Kaipi, and they're just able to build up these basic items on their heroes that really help get them going.
Yeah, exactly. And another great thing that Kaipi decided to do in this game, Chen, unsung hero in a way, but of course helping push lanes. But he also, I think, I couldn't count exactly how many, but it was at least 5 smokes during the game he bought, and most of them in the early phases. And just how much movement they had. Now, granted, I saw at least one smoke game coming out from Fnatic with the Alchemist Roam and Visage, but Chen with his creeps and bringing some other heroes with him, he just wanted to control the map, and they did it so well that really shut down, the side lanes. All they were allowed to have was Dragon Knight free farm, and it definitely was not enough. You need Tinker. If you're going to pick him, you need him to have a decent start. When he gets shut down, his whole team suffers essentially because he can't teleport around and help defend towers. He can't get farm up really quickly. But until he gets Boots of Travels, he's really stuck in a bad place.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, too, I feel like, when we're talking about how bursty Kaipi were. We look at Tinker, and part of his build was getting that Blink Dagger just to make sure he can get himself to a position where he's safe and can try and push out the lanes. But, of course, this means you're not going to get any stats out of it. You're not going to get a Sheep Stick that you can refresh in team fights and that sort of thing. So, I think sort of playing off that fear of being caught out by the Nature's Prophet, by the Vengeful Spirit, really, I think, put him in a much worse position later on in the game. And, this is kind of interesting, maybe just something to bring up as a general point. I feel like there was a time where Tinker kind of was, like, way awesome. Like, he came up a lot. I remember MTW favored him pretty heavily, even in tri-lanes scenarios.
As well, loved him.
Yeah, and you would just see some of these games, you're like, holy crap, this Tinker, how can you let him go through the bans? Winds up falling out of favor for a bit, and then I feel like the last couple instances I've seen him come out just gets countered so hard, or winds up not being able to put anything together for his team. The hard countering being Mass Blade Mails, which is hilarious, and go ahead and Google one of those games if you haven't gotten to see one. Yeah, it's a lot of fun and to watch, and then just in this game, like I was saying, just not able to put any items together that really wind up helping in the team fights.
Yeah, exactly. It was just a great job from KP all around, taking full advantage of their lineup and doing it well, and taking advantage also of the fact of a hero like Tinker, who is just as vulnerable as Shadow Fiend. Very, very vulnerable. And there was actually a point, it's funny, you were like talking about how Tinker was kind of scared of the Nature's Prophet gank, and as soon as you said those words, Nature's Prophet TP'd in middle and treed up Tinker and he died. And I was just like, that's exactly it. I mean, you know, he's not like Quap where he can blink out of that and have no problem. No, he's got to stand there and unfortunately take it. And, you know, they, like I said, took just full advantage of that and really just snowballed from it.
Absolutely. I mean, what do you think about going into Game 3?
Yeah, that's pretty good. You had another timestamp in here. I don't know if it was worth really watching, though.
Oh, yeah!
The Shadow Fiend trapping Dragon Knight?
Yes, I just thought this was like a cute little fight, and maybe just something to bring up very quickly. It's one of those things that the Requiem of Souls buff that happened a while ago, where it had the sort of death explosion as well, releasing half the number of souls. It was just fun to watch this nice little man fight between Dragon Knight and the Shadow Fiend that winds up producing an extra kill out on the side because of the Requiem death.
Yeah, exactly, and it got the Visage kill as well, kind of by accident. But yeah, the double explosion. It was a great buff that was kind of definitely just overlooked, I think, by a lot of teams, just because he still wasn't getting picked up a lot afterwards. But you know, when you see it in action, especially in times like that, where it actually does its maximum damage twice, you know, that's when you're really seeing the power of it. Because obviously, if you're on top of someone, that's a ton of damage. Does not happen very often, granted, because it's a channel time, or people could just BKB normally, but not in that case, and it definitely paid off. So a quick game, definitely a quick game. I believe it was under 30 minutes, or it was close to. So you know, they make it 1-1 to go into Game 3 for this, and then I can go to Game 3.
I'll let you go ahead and take it if you like, sir, because I think I introduced the first two. What were your general thoughts?
It was a long game. That's my first thought.
Had a length.
We were watching it like before we were about to go to bed. We were kind of like starting to snooze towards the end because there were definitely parts that were exciting, but then there were definitely parts that were not exciting. And unfortunately, you have to stick through the whole game to see how it resolves, because unless you got little timestamps or not. But obviously, if we're analyzing it, we can't skip around. So we stuck through it, wear and tear. But overall, I liked the lineups, I liked the picks, and it really ended up being a very close game.
Yeah, it was. I mean, of course, if you watch all the way through it, it winds up to be quite the nail-biter towards the end. But let's go ahead and just talk about the initial picks, and I think there's something really important to bring up here. Walking through the Kaipi lineup, you might get a little bit of deja vu as we see the Bane, the Shadow Fiend, Chen, the Clockwork, and the Vengeful Spirit. 4 of the 5 heroes we got to see in the last game.
Yeah, and it's because the only reason they didn't get the same 5 is because Fnatic first banned Nature's Prophet. They knew he was a big element to the success of a game before it, and obviously took him out right away. But there's a point in the banning phase where I was screaming at my monitor. Maybe not screaming, that might be a little, but I was pretty loud and right to the attention of my monitor. They had 1 ban left to go, and there was 1 pick left to go for the KP. And they didn't have Vengeful yet. And I was like, they're going to take Vengeful. Fnatic, they're going to take. They have the same lineup except for Vengeful pretty much so far. They're going to get it. And you know who they decided to ban instead? Lone Druid, which by all means in a decent pushing lineup is good for a normal team. But you just saw last game the power of Vengeful Spirit, how great he can be, and how well Eternal Envy plays it as well. And they decided to ban Lone Druid instead, and sure enough, within like a second of the ban, they picked Vengeful. It's like he had it moused over, like, yes, got it. You know, like he was so excited to have it. So, if I was Fly, let's just say, I would have had the right ban. But, you know, I guess I wasn't their drafter for the game, so couldn't happen.
I think that's interesting, and it's something I hadn't really thought of before. But when you look across the arc of this whole game, I think this whole series, it tells a really interesting story, because really kind of what I mentioned at the end when we were talking about Game 1 is you have Fnatic who see this crazy lineup from pretty much pick 1, certainly pick 2.
Yes.
They know they're in for a ride. But they just fan pick pretty standard. They aren't intimidated by this crazy lineup. They're not worried about it. They're just going to play their game out. And I think that's kind of, I mean, yeah, of course this is the bands. It's not like it's actually what they're picking. But I think in the series, they just say all the way through, this is what we think is the strongest in the metagame. This is what we think are our strong heroes. And if we're playing our good game and we have those heroes that we don't want to play against out, we're going to be able to win. And it's nice that, yeah, okay, maybe you just played against this. Maybe you should expect it. It's kind of nice that you just have a team that goes, you know what, we can play our game and we're going to win it.
Exactly. Very confident in their picks and bans. And speaking of that, KP, internally, all 3 games bans Wisp Batrider first 2. Why do you think that is?
Because they're crazy good. Is that a strong enough answer?
It's reasonable. I definitely understand Batrider, but Wisp, I mean, yeah, we've seen him in his prime do amazing work, but I feel like he's kind of fallen off the mark a little bit recently.
I think you could say that it might be weird in this game because Kaipi's lineup in these last 2 are certainly kind of about running around as a group, and you'll see through this game that that's one of the things that Fnatic try to abuse, is being able to move people around the map quickly so that they can apply pressure elsewhere and make Kaipi either commit to pushing or going back to defending. And that's something that they really tried to use a lot to sort of buy themselves some time for their Alchemist and their Queen of Pain. I still just think that Wisp is an amazing hero, and I get it. I mean, I really don't know who you might want to ban instead. I mean, of course, Fnatic, this is something you mentioned while we were watching all these games. If they have the chance to first pick Alchemist, they do. So maybe you go, well, Alchemist's pretty strong. Let's maybe try and ban that out. But really, there really aren't any other heroes that are so destructive to the game that I would want to take them out. I think the Wisp is just that guy that's always going to make the game change. That I think has always been his biggest strength, is that you have to play differently. You have to expect a different play style out of the team doing it. And, what if you were able to just TP somebody out to a tower to get it pushed down quickly while Kaipi is trying to send all 5 into the middle lane or something? What if you are able to find Shadow Fiend out and you're able to pick them off very quickly, or Vengeful Spirit even, for that matter? Because again, she's played as this semi-carry. I think it just adds a lot of questions into the game, and that's probably something that Eternal Envy had in mind.
No, actually that does make a lot of good sense. But there's definitely points in this draft where I feel like Eternal Envy is just 100% sure of his game plan, his strategy, and I feel like Fly is not. And the reason I say that, the bans coming out, I see Darkseer and OD coming out, their next 2 bans. It's like they're not even like, I think he's more just going what he thinks they might try, or like what would make sense in a normal game. But and then like I said, didn't ban the Vengeful in his last pick. You've got to be able to adapt, and I feel like he should realize what they've been doing, what was so successful last game, and try to focus that out instead. Like banning Chen, I thought would have made perfect sense there, because obviously another great force they had for their pushing potential. You take a strong, I mean, yeah, they could have had like Enchantress or something instead, but let's be honest, Chen definitely can be a lot more of a threat, I feel like, early on, especially when it hits 6. It definitely does a lot of work early on.
Yeah, and I think Chen fits this style better anyway, because I think the creeps are obviously a big part of it, but I think the Hand of God that really is why you want Chen in this lineup, to be able to save Shadow Fiend and Vengeful Spirit. But I think you bring up a good point, and maybe this is again how you can say, whether or not it's to his benefit or to their downfall, Fly is just confident in the game they play. You could just take Kaipi's half of the board off completely. What if you just went to Fly and you said, Fly, these are the 10 heroes you can't pick. Draft. And this is what you would get, probably. This is almost exactly what you could get. Obviously, maybe the Nature's Prophet, maybe the Nyx might not pop up in that first tier, but he could have just auto-drafted this without paying attention to the other side of the board for the most part, and this is probably pretty close to what you might see.
Right, exactly. He's playing more to the meta instead of the team, and that's where I think you start coming into some issues. But, I mean, it also might be the fact that they weren't scared of a hero like Vengeful. They're like, okay, he's got some good stuff, but Lone Druid would tear us up late game, and we'd rather not see that force. We'd rather face a Vengeful late game instead. So, I mean, I can definitely see both sides of the argument, but considering what a player is comfortable with, and as well as how well it's synergized with the team, is something you cannot forget when you're doing these drafts.
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe, we've been on this draft a lot, but I think the other thing to point out, especially about those last 3 bans for Fnatic, I feel like they're all one-on-one bans, right? Like, Queen of Pain versus the OD, let's ban out the OD. We're going to wind up maybe getting the Darkseer against our Bounty Hunter, or it could go up against our Tri-Lane, so he's going to be able to jungle if he really wants to get the farm anyway. Let's ban him out. And then Lone Druid, we have these super mobile heroes in Bounty Hunter and Queen of Pain. He's going to be able to root him in place and get him blown up. So I think just really interesting to see the 2 different really styles of picking and banning across this series.
So we didn't say the picks for Fnatic. It was Alchemist, Quap, Bounty Hunter, Kodal, and Windrunner as their 5th. We've already been over the line for Kaipi. Everything except Clockwork replacing that Nature's Prophet from last game. Windrunner, by the way, an interesting choice. Obviously going to be run as a support this game instead of normally, back in the day at least, you would see her as that side lane, but they have the Bounty Hunter for that taken care of. And Alchemist, instead of last game being a roamer, he's going to be farming again, what he's actually good at, and getting that Goblin's Greed early on too, unlike both first games where he didn't get Goblin's Greed early. Now he gets it full on with his Unstable Concoction and gets to farm away, and really, obviously, early game puts Fnatic in the lead with Quap dominating that middle, and not dominating, maybe a little stronger word, but definitely having his way with, how do you pronounce his name? Taya? I'm trying to figure out how they pronounce that middle guy's name.
Arteezy.
Arteezy, that's right. He could just make my life easier by spelling it out that way, but I guess he'd rather not. It's like Havorst. Nice. Like, Xbox is Havorst. Like, you just have to know these things.
Those Russian letters.
Yeah, apparently they mean something else to people. But even with Enfeeble, it's a similar strategy where he gets to Enfeeble Quap a few times early on, but yet Hani, just so good with the last hitting on Quap in general, still gets some denies and last hits with his Enfeebles, and then eventually Bane just leaves it alone and goes on his merry way. And Hani, like I said, he was able to get his hero finally again, and he does a lot of great things with it this game.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is something we've been seeing a lot more of with like the Windrunner being played as a support in a tri-lane scenario, is able to help generate a little bit of pressure down there in the bottom lane, but doesn't really make a whole lot of it. Of course, being up against a solo Clockwork, not a ton that you could have done, perhaps. But let's go ahead and just go up to the first timestamp we have for this game. It's 14:40 in the VOD, where we actually get to see the first blood that we were talking about earlier on in the show, where Vengeful Spirit able to one-on-one and get a kill against Bounty Hunter under the tower.
Alright, I'm skipped ahead, and I'm there. So you want to go through this?
Just very basically, she's able to just harass him down. Flat out. This is, I think, a really important thing to point out in both of these games, Game 2 and Game 3. Vengeful Spirit is up against a solo. Either the Bounty Hunter in this scenario. So she really isn't contested. There's no aggressive tri-lane, because, of course, I think in that sort of situation, you really would have started to see the shortcomings of Vengeful Spirit in that short attack range, making it more difficult for her to farm. But here, not only is she able to get the kill on the Bounty Hunter, but it's made possible because of a decision to drop an Iron Branch, which is actually sitting on a support hero, and hold herself the Dust, and is able to help use that nice little slow that got added to the Dust to secure that first kill, and then, of course, the massive burst damage of the Magic Missile.
No, exactly. That's definitely a good way to put it. And yeah, showing off that buff to Dust is really nice. Obviously, there's going to be 10% not going to make a big deal in some aspects of the game, but especially when there's a chase going on early on like that, where move speed's critical for you to escape. Definitely came in to be a factor there. Another thing I want to point out, I know it's a little backtracking, but they wanted Hani to win so bad mid that not only did he get to go his Null Talisman, get that extra stats up really early with a couple branches, they also fed him tangos and a healing salve from other supports. Like, they gave him everything that he could need to win that middle. And I think that's just so putting a lot of course, pressure and weight on his shoulders to help carry his team. But obviously, they trust him to be able to use those things well into really get the substantial start he needs to, do well later in the game.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could see it was sort of the same story as in Game 2, where you try to get this early harass from Bane, and just the Enfeeble to try and give your Shadow Fiends a little bit of help. Because like you said, he does struggle right off the bat, just securing those first couple kills, getting his damage up by collecting the souls. Really important, and it's really nice to see Kaipi have really just made it sort of part of this strategy that seems to, operate independently from the metagame, really. It's just all sort of about playing this one style, and you can see just how much they've worked it into even getting their support to play in that middle lane for the first 30 seconds, minute of the game.
Exactly. So, obviously, things are actually a lot more even in this game. Kind of what happens in the first bit of the game is VS and Alchemist are left to free farm, and clearly, when Alchemist can level Goblin's Greed, that's going to just benefit the Alchemist team in general, because he gets the extra gold. So, and then it's a Vengeful Spirit free farming. So, yeah, she can benefit, but to a level that a hard carry can, not necessarily. So, obviously, that puts Fnatic in a lead, like I was saying before. But then they start grouping up. They start doing team fight activities, and you really get to see the power of this lineup once again come to fruition. And maybe now I should go to the Roshan fight, where a lot of craziness ensues. Let me jump over to that.
It was a very good one, a really great fight. It was a lot of fun, where Kaipi looked to go in and engage on the Roshan. They get caught by Fnatic. And I think it's really just a great sort of show of why the Vengeful Spirit decided to build this way. Because if I remember correctly, when the Vengeful Spirit as sort of the semi-carry was sort of a big thing, the Aghanim Scepter was a part of it, getting those general stats, and even potentially going into like a Manta style. But here it is really just that Tranquil Boots into drums and then into the BKB. And you get to see here where Vengeful Spirit's able to catch out the Keeper of the Light and then pops the drum charges to run back to her team. They pick off that Keeper so quickly and then are able to continue that on. Clockwork catches out the Bounty Hunter, so they pick up 2 kills right there. And then once they clean up the rest of this fight, they wind up going right back into the Roche pit. They actually wind up killing Roche 5 times this game. And, again, it just shows how important not only Roshan, but those Roshan-centered fights are to this Kaipi lineup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is a great basis point for their fighting, and they do it so well with their CC. Clockwork, I think, was actually a great surprise addition for them. I think they may have wanted the NP like they had last game, but Clockwork really ties it all together. He's able to initiate from a long range, similar to Vengeful Spirit if she isn't able to. Traps people in, which is just enormous for heroes like Shadow Fiend as well as other ones to do their maximum AoE damage as well as just get some nice autos in. He really does bind it together, and I really enjoyed his presence on this team. I mean, he didn't get like big items or anything, not really throughout the game. I mean, more than Bounty Hunter, we can say that for sure. Poor Trixie this game was sitting on the same items for probably about 30 to 40 minutes of this game, just trying to find safety and comfort in little bits of farm you can get here and there, but more was used as a moving ward for most of the game.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question. I'll give you some time to think about it, too.
Great.
Which is nice, right? I'm not going to put you completely on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious as to what you think maybe Fnatic could have drafted a little bit differently to maybe make this game fall into their favor a little bit more. Because, we kind of look at it, and like I said, it winds up being that they basically try and force Kaipi to choose between killing buildings in Fnatic's base or defending buildings in their base. The Queen of Pain really does a great job trying to split push. Kodal does a really great job being able to teleport people back into fights, but you just kind of look at this team that's able to pick up somebody really quickly with the Nether Swap, unload on them. I was just like, man, obviously he's not really a big pick. He's not one that we see a lot, especially anymore, but I was like, could you imagine what a Silencer could have done in this game, being able to drop that ulti? And then if you had something like a Storm Spirit on top of that where you're able to just, they're trying to initiate, we can not only stop it, but then we can catch them out because we know they're all together. I think it would have been an interesting strategy to try to run. Do you have anything that you think might be a fun way to maybe try and fight this Kaipi strategy? Or even a legit way to fight this Kaipi strategy.
It doesn't have to be fun. You don't have to have fun doing it. I was actually thinking back. I mean, Windrunner, I really don't like her that much for this lineup. Now, she did get some really nice shackles out of the game. I'll have to give her that. There was definitely some times where Shadowfee and someone else were tied together for 3 or 4 seconds, and it definitely bought them some time. However, that being said, I would have replaced her with someone else, and who I had in mind, they banned Darkseer. I would have loved if they could have picked up Darkseer instead. Just for the fact that he's not only amazing at defending, which, I mean, Kodal they have that for, sure, but he's also another great team fighter that really helps throughout the thing. Put that wall down, get Shadow Fiend in vengeful images to start beating on the enemy team, get the vacuum to pull them all together for a Quap Ult or an Alchemist stun or a Kodal wave. I mean, he really can synergize well with a lot of their lineup. Or you could even replace, instead of Winter, you could replace Bounty Hunter. He didn't do much at all this game. I mean, maybe in their mind they were thinking they could get some kills, get some gold, and really benefit that way, but I mean, we saw how it played out. He didn't do a whole lot for his team. And maybe a Darkseer in the offlane would have done so much more for their team instead.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that I know when we were watching the VOD. Trixie just winds up sitting on the same items for such a long time. Not necessarily, you know, against him, but really just when you look at this play style, I think Kaipi are really just focused on sticking together, having multiple heroes together, and obviously that's not a situation, not a setting where Bounty Hunter excels.
Exactly. He's great for picking off people. Obviously, that is his need. And when the team's grouped up, like you were saying, for the Wisp argument, same thing for a Bounty Hunter argument. To be honest, it's about finding kills and benefiting from it. Well, they're grouped up for most of this game. So where is Bounty going to come into play? And obviously, they're buying tons of sentries, some dust. They get the gem later on. He's essentially useless at that point. He can't even get in there and initiate or even set up some tracks. So really does just not do a whole lot for the majority of this game.
Yeah, and I mean, that's once the game starts getting really late, and again, where Fnatic really start to break into this sort of split push orientation, trying to gain some ground in another lane where Kaipi aren't. They don't even have to put the gem on somebody risky to try and keep it in the front to try and pick off Bounty Hunter. They just stick it on Chen. If they catch him, that's cool. If they don't, whatever. Bounty Hunter's not there. And they just get to do whatever they want. So it was really interesting that they didn't have to be risky with it. They really did just get to run where they wanted to and get to do what they wanted.
Yeah, exactly. But a few more little points here before we get to the end of it. He did go. Hani went Dezo on this Quap, and we like that for multiple reasons. The first one being he was their split pusher. Obviously, he has great mobility. He can survive most ganks. There was a couple times where the synergy was so perfect on KP that they were able to catch him out without him being able to react at all. What was it? A swap into a clockwork ult into a stun or something? It was the most ridiculous thing they put together, and yet they could pull it off because of their great communication and teamwork. But the Dezo, obviously, reducing that armor on towers and just letting him kind of just nail through it was really important and a great pickup. A lot better than a Scotty, I'd have to say. I was glad to not see that pickup come in. He actually went, I'd say, normal items for the most part in this case. He went the Lincolns, he went the Sheep Stick. Just went really tanky and a good CC all around. But late game, how it happened basically, Fnatic was able to push in the top lane, and they got the whole lane cleared out, but they traded a lane for a lane essentially, and then eventually they kept losing in fights or whatever it was, people got picked off, and they lost eventually all their lanes, and all they had left to do was they had a choice. They could either win a team fight and then just somehow miraculously push, or they could split push and hope that they could base race and win. And it's ultimately what they tried to do is to base race, and that's what kind of made a nail biter right at the end. I think it was after 5 Roshans or something ridiculous, but after the 5th one is when it really just went all out, but there was just too many mega creeps in the base, they couldn't hold them off, and it was just too much damage, and they ended up losing, and so KP ended up taking it 2-3, or 2-1, excuse me.
2-3, that is an impressive win.
Most would say the odds are not in your favor, but, they pulled it off.
Those are some interesting tournament rules where you win 2-3. But,
heavily weighted.
Yes, absolutely. But it was a great game. I mean, I'm actually looking at the end of it right now. It winds up being 12 to 26 for a 57-minute long game. So not the most exciting in terms of kills, but I think really just fun and a great way to sort of look at the metagame, the strategy, and the way that these team captains are thinking. And of course, this is weeks before the international. All these captains are trying to work out what they might try to take to the tournament. So it's kind of neat just to see these sort of weird spin-off things, as well as teams really trying to hone their skills for this worldwide tournament.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it just makes it that much more exciting. Now, Slark, I mean, what happened to him? He was in the scene for like 2 weeks. He's gone again, but maybe he'll make his reappearance. And that might have been a joke based on him disappearing with his ultimate. I mean, it could have worked if I had put any thought into that at all, but I did not, unfortunately.
It's okay.
But it definitely ended up being a great series, like you said, and I would, in general, just follow KP around. Like, I would just watch their games from now on, just because they just showed not only are they going to make interesting picks, maybe not all the time necessarily, but some of the time, but they also, I just can't get over how great their synergy is and how, like, just coordinated they are. I mean, not many teams you can see that kind of reaction time and that kind of just like they are very comfortable with each other. And like I said, that was with a stand-in. That was with Sing Sing coming in there and being a stand-in, and still they played that well. So props to them for that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not like Eternal Envy dreamed up this whole strategy. I guess if you want to say he sort of brushed the dust off of it and sort of took it out again for another spin. But like I was saying earlier, you just saw how much they worked it out to make it work into their favor. And of course, the 2 games that they wind up winning are the 2 where they run this pretty much cookie cutter strat from game 2 to game 3 really well and pull out the W.
Yep. So we got through it, and actually that did take about an hour. So still a normal episode time considering, and I feel like we didn't let our listeners down. I feel like that was pretty good for both sides. But this kind of thing where we try new things requires a lot of feedback, guys. So if you have anything you want to say, if you think it sucked, which I hope you don't think that, but if you do, if you think it was awesome and you'd like to see more kind of things like that, if you think BDLM should get longer haircuts, it's a little short this week, and I'm just a little nervous seeing that kind of haircut. Anything you want to say, really, we'll take it, obviously. So that's all I really got to say.
And of course, I had fun doing it. It was nice. We both got to do some nice research. We got to take some notes. We got to we got to watch some great games on top of it. So if you guys come across any series that you're like, I thought this was awesome, this was a lot of fun, go ahead and shoot it our way. We will gladly take a look at it, and maybe you'll see this format again. So, you know what, guys, keep watching those games. Of course, the International is coming soon, and that's going to be awesome. But until then, keep watching all this awesome Dota that's going on. We will see you guys next week.